Hello, and welcome to this evening's webinar, Specific Objects, the Judd Foundation Archives, with our guest speaker, Erin Schneider. My name is Samantha Rowe, and I am the Director of Programming for the Archivist Roundtable of Metropolitan New York and the moderator for this evening's talk. I'm delighted to introduce tonight's speaker. Erin Schneider is the archivist at the Judd Foundation located in Marfa, Texas. She received her MLIS from UCLA and her BA from Hampshire College. She has held previous positions at the Mike Kelly Foundation for the Arts and the Social and Public Art Resource Center in Los Angeles. The Judd Foundation is an organization dedicated to preserving the life, work, and legacy of the artist Donald Judd. We're honored to be joined by Erin, who will share their experience on the collection, archival processes, and how these materials contribute to ongoing research and scholarship. Before we begin tonight's presentation, I would like to mention a couple of upcoming exciting events that are listed on the Archivist Roundtable's calendar. On Tuesday, April 1st at 6 p.m., actually a week from today, we will be hosting a webinar with the Metropolitan Museum of Art Archives via Zoom, which unfortunately will not be recorded. So I recommend registering, and I hope you don't miss out. On Wednesday, April 2nd, we are going to be given a tour of the Leo Baeck Institute and Archives, and we'll also have a chance to explore their current exhibitions. And I'm going to make a plug for the Education Committee, who have organized an in-person workshop titled Web Archiving, Responsible Policies and Practices in the Age of AI on Saturday, April 12th at 10 a.m. And this is exclusively for ART members only. We will soon be announcing some other upcoming events for this spring, so do stay tuned. Some final housekeeping items. Please note that this webinar is being recorded, so if you wish to turn off your cameras, please do so now, and we ask that everyone silence their microphones for the duration of today's talk. Please include any questions or comments in the chat box. We will have time at the end of the session to answer them. You will also find a link to view the Judd Foundation Archives website in addition to other art-related items in the chat. So without further ado, I would like to hand it over to you, Erin. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Samantha. All right. Just making sure everything's all set. Okay, so thank you all for coming. First of all, I'd like to thank Samantha, Director of Programming at Archivist Roundtable, for reaching out to me about visiting the Judd Foundation Archives. As noted, our archives are located in Marfa, not New York, so that led us to this webinar format and what brings us together here today. I also want to thank you all for your patience, since this was originally supposed to happen on March 4th, but due to some wild winds in Marfa, we had to reschedule to today. So thank you for your patience and for being here. And on this slide is an image of the original folder that Donald Judd kept his drafts for the essay Specific Objects in, which I have named today's presentation after and will be discussing more later. Okay, to give you an idea of what to expect, I'll start with a brief introduction to myself and how I came to Judd Foundation, followed by an introduction to the artist Donald Judd and to the foundation itself. I'll then share an overview of our archival collections with a focus on some of my favorite examples from the Donald Judd Papers, and end with some current and future projects in the archive, followed by a short Q&A. I want to share that the image on the right is of Untitled 1967, a Judd work that is part of the collection of the Museum of Modern Art in New York. I have included a few images of examples of Judd's work throughout this presentation for context, but the focus will be on archival material rather than works of art. So you've received a brief introduction to me already, but I wanted to delve a little deeper. I received my MLIS in 2022 from UCLA with a focus in archives. And right after graduating, I came to Marfa, Texas to be an intern in the Judd Foundation Archives. That was part of an NEH grant to assist in the processing of the Donald Judd Papers. And that was under the guidance of Archivist and Director of Programs, Caitlin Murray, Project Archivist Irene Luley, and Archives Associate Susan Moorer, who I still work with today. In 2023, I joined the Mike Kelly Foundation for the Arts in Los Angeles as processing archivist for a term position. Once that term ended, I returned to Judd Foundation in June 2024 as archivist. I've been learning a lot about our collections since June of last year, and I look forward to sharing some of what I've learned so far with you today. A brief introduction to Donald Judd. I assume a lot of you might be familiar, but I wanted to share that he remains one of the most significant artists of the 20th century. And though no longer with us, his radical ideas and work continue to provoke and influence the fields of art, architecture, and design. Little biographical information. Judd was born on June 3rd, 1928 in Excelsior Springs, Missouri. He served in the United States Army in Korea from June 1946 until November 1947. Upon his return to the US, Judd studied philosophy and art history at Columbia University and painting at the Art Students League. From 1959 to 1965, he worked as an art critic, often writing over a dozen reviews a month. Judd was, in fact, a painter until the early 1960s, as can be seen in this image on the slide. But beginning in the 60s, he began making work in 3 dimensions, which some would argue changed the idea of art. Judd developed his ideas concerning the permanent installation of artwork, first in New York at 101 Spring Street, pictured here, a 5-story cast iron building that he purchased in 1968. Designed by Nicholas White and constructed in 1870, it was the first building Judd owned and served as his New York residence and studio. Judd began to purchase properties in Marfa in 1973, where he would continue permanently installing his work and the work of others. In 1977, he established the idea for Judd Foundation and founded the Chinati Foundation, also called the La Fundación Chinati, in 1986. He would continue creating, writing, and designing until his death in 1994. Judd Foundation maintains and preserves Donald Judd's permanently installed living and working spaces, libraries, and archives in New York and Marfa. The foundation promotes a wider understanding of Judd's artistic legacy by providing access to these spaces and resources, and by developing scholarly and educational programs. It is a 501c3 nonprofit. And if folks are interested, I highly encourage you to peruse the website, juddfoundation.org. We have a lot of resources on there about the many projects, exhibitions, lectures, tours, and activities of Judd Foundation. And an overview of our archival collections. Our current archival collections include the Donald Judd Papers, which I'll be focusing on today as our largest and most used collection. Other collections include early estate and foundation records, as well as collections that were donated to the foundation by various collaborators of Judd, as well as his family. These collections include the Roy and Effie Judd Papers, his parents, the Jamie Deering Papers, his assistant, and the Loretta Vincerelli Papers, Adrian Yola's papers, and Claude Armstrong and Donna Cohen Papers, all of whom were architects and collaborators of Judd. As I mentioned, I'll be focusing the majority of this presentation on the Judd Papers, as represented through some of my favorite material in each series and subseries. This is barely skimming the surface of the collection, but I thought it would be fun to share some interesting material from each series rather than just reading the finding aid to you. That said, the finding aid is online if anyone cares to peruse it in the future. The extent of the Donald Judd Papers is 447 boxes, Hollinger boxes, 53 oversized boxes, 19 flat files, and 14 portfolios for oversized material. The Donald Judd Papers document the studio practice and personal activities of the artist, including art fabrication, property acquisitions, exhibitions, writings, and publications, among other things. It's worth noting that not all of our material is open for public research due to PII, as well as ongoing research by our catalog Raise It 18. However, I will be sharing some selections with you today. Our first series is Works. Excuse me while I have a sip of water. Works consist of materials related to Donald Judd's activities in art, architecture, furniture, and design, which are the 4 subseries. The bulk of this material was created and maintained by Judd's studio. On the left is an image of Untitled 1969, which is installed at the block in Marfa as a permanent installation. Besides his early paintings and works, Judd was known for working with fabricators to create works out of wood, metal, plexiglass, and other materials. He also made prints. In this subseries, we have extensive material about Judd's prints and works in addition. Judd's father, Roy C. Judd, was an accomplished woodworker and helped Judd create woodblocks and prints from his designs. On the left, you can see an example of a drawing by Roy Judd for a print from 1978. And on the right, a recent photograph of one of the prints made from this drawing, taken from the 2nd edition Shellman Catalog Raisonné, which, if you're interested, is available for perusal online via Ars Publicata. Subseries B is Architecture and Spaces, which is related to architectural projects and spaces created by Judd, including ones that are still maintained by the foundation, such as 101 Spring Street in New York, the Block, also known as La Manzana di Chinati in Marfa, Judd's Ranches, and Art and Architecture Studios. We also have material that relates to projects that Judd worked on outside of Marfa and New York, such as Eichelturn, a Swiss chalet that Judd transformed into his home and studio beginning in 1987. Here is a 1970 interior photograph of 101 Spring Street of the artist's wife at the time, Julie Finch, and their children, Rainer and Flaven. Judd would often renovate his spaces to fit his visions. An interesting example of Judd's renovations can be seen in these 2 images of the block, or La Manzana di Chinati, which is located in Marfa and named after the nearby Chinati mountain range. It's called the Block because it is the size of 1 city block. The block would become Judd's home while living in Marfa, as well as a space for installation of his art, libraries, and gardens. On the left is the property as captured by assistant Jamie Deering in 1975, with one of Judd's 1964 works behind him. To the right is a contemporary photograph of the site with significant alterations from Judd's lifetime, including adobe walls and gravel. Eichelturn, as mentioned earlier, was a Swiss chalet that Judd began to work on in 1987. On the left is a pre-renovation photograph of the chalet. And on the right, an example of some of the plans for Eichelturn as drawn by Swiss architect Adrian Joles. Followed by an image of the interior in 1991 after the renovation, which I included for the excellent lake view. Next, we have subseries C, furniture. This pertains to the design, distribution, loan, and sale of furniture designed by Judd, which is still manufactured, sold, and distributed by the foundation today. This is an invitation for a Judd furniture exhibition that happened at 101 Spring Street in 1993. I shared it because I think it's a very nice example of Judd's iterative design practice as seen through this image of multiple chairs. If you're interested in learning more about the thinking behind Judd's furniture, I recommend reading his 1993 essay, "It's Hard to Find a Good Lamp." He ends the essay by saying, quote, "I am often told that the furniture is not comfortable, and in that, not functional. The source of the question is in the overstuffed bourgeois Victorian furniture, which, as I said, never ceased. The furniture is comfortable to me. Rather than making a chair to sleep in or a machine to live in, it is better to make a bed. A straight chair is best for eating or writing, and the third position is standing." I'd also recommend the new publication, Donald Judd Furniture, co-published by MacBooks and Judd Foundation. If you're interested in Judd furniture, it's an extremely well-researched and designed book that is really excellent for understanding the crux and evolution of Judd's furniture designs. Next, we have design. While perhaps best known for his artwork and furniture, Judd also designed, amongst other things, dishware, textiles, toys, a parquet floor, and a water bottle. A favorite example of mine is his design for vitrines for Mac, or the Museum of Applied Arts in Vienna. The vitrines, interestingly, were designed for the room showcasing the permanent collection of Baroque, Rococo, and classic arts. As you all know, archives are fantastic for showing the process behind production. So I wanted to share this 1993 drawing for the Mac vitrines on the left by Judd. It includes measurements and considerations such as, quote, "The table can be made as a whole. The case should probably be made in parts," end quote. Next to it, you can see a fax from the museum with fabrication drawings that were sent for Judd's approval. And finally, an image of the vitrines on situ, where they are still showcasing art today. I really find the contrast between the vitrines and the art being displayed striking, so I wanted to share that with you all. Next, we have our museum, galleries, and collectors series. This is organized into 5 subseries, being museums and galleries, collectors, Dia Art Foundation records, the Chinati Foundation, and exhibition catalogs. The image on the left is of a permanently installed 1977 Untitled work in Munster, Germany, for which we have planning and correspondence material. In interest of time, I'm only going to be sharing items from the Chinati Foundation and exhibition catalog subseries. To give some context, Dia Art Foundation partnered with Donald Judd to start a large-scale museum with permanent installations in Marfa, utilizing a former military installation for D.A. Russell. Though Judd and Dia end up parting ways, Judd would open the Chinati Foundation in 1986, and it continues to be open to this day, home to permanent installations by Judd, Dan Flavin, Robert Irwin, and more. I also want to mention that Chinati has robust programming, internship programs, artists in residence, and education and conservation initiatives. That brings me to these images. One of the collection of Judd works at Chinati is his 100 untitled works in mill aluminum. On the left is a 1982 sketch, not by Judd, for these pieces, as appearing in what was called the South Gun Shed, or what we now call the South Artillery Shed. Each work has a unique configuration, but share the same exterior dimensions. The other image is of one of the artillery sheds at Chinati from 2003. I'd also like to share a 1979 drawing for the layout of pieces made by the artist John Chamberlain, made of automobile parts, which was also proposed for the South Artillery Shed, where the aluminum works are today. The Chamberlains would end up in a different building, formerly the Marfa Wool and Mohair building, and across from the post office on the main street in town, where it is open for tours today through Chinati Foundation. And on the right is a picture of some of the John Chamberlain pieces from 1979 in the artillery shed prior to its renovation and prior to its movement, prior to the movement of the art to the current site. We also have many examples of exhibition catalogs in our collection from both solo and group exhibitions, including Judd, many of which are out of print or difficult to find nowadays. I selected this 1970 catalog for Judd's solo show at the Van Abbe Museum in the Netherlands for its flashy gold cover and excellent typeface, as well as its importance as being the artist's first major European retrospective. The exhibition catalog includes 6 selected writings by Judd, encompassing some of his art criticism, first published in Arts Magazine, and his essay, Specific Objects. It also has an interview with Judd and fellow artist Frank Stella. The catalog and poster were created by Dutch graphic designer Jan van Ton. Our third series is Writings and Publications. This contains handwritten and typed drafts and photocopies of reviews, essays, published letters, and notes by Judd, as well as drafts, proofs, correspondence, corrections, and notes related to publications made by or associated with him. The image on this slide is a spread from the 1993 Furniture Retrospective book published by Museum Boijmans van Beuningen, which is now, as I mentioned, out of print and hard to find. A large portion of the material in our writings subseries is handwritten and typed drafts for essays and other Judd writings. I wanted to share a page from one of his typed drafts for Specific Objects, a now famous 1964 essay. In it, he describes the art being produced in New York in the 1960s that is neither painting or sculpture, but can be considered three-dimensional works. He writes, quote, "3 dimensions are real space. That gets rid of the problem of illusionism and of literal space, space in and around marks and colors, which is riddance of one of the salient and most objectionable relics of European art. The several limits of painting are no longer present. A work can be as powerful as it can be thought to be. Actual space is intrinsically more powerful and specific than paint on a flat surface." Another example from this subseries is a handwritten draft of his 1969 essay, Complaints Part 1, which was indeed the first of other complaints written. Many of Judd's drafts are handwritten on this yellow paper, which was ordered in bulk and often used in the studio for writing and sketches and notes. To read an excerpt of his Complaints Part 1, quote, "I have a lot of complaints. Most of these are about attempts to close the fairly open situation of contemporary art. There are a lot of arguments for closure, a whole aesthetic or style, a half aesthetic or movement, a way of working, history or development, seniority, juniority, money and galleries, sociology, politics, nationalism," end quote. Complaints Part 2 would follow in 1973. While a selection of the writings in this subseries were published in the Judd Writings book in 2016, there are additional unpublished notes, lectures, and other writings open for research if anyone is interested. In the publication subseries, we have working files for publications by and about Judd. One of the larger undertakings was the 1975 Catalog Raisonné project, which accompanied a retrospective at the National Gallery of Canada, Ottawa. Edited by his assistants Dudley Del Balso and Roberta Smith, and curator Bryden Smith, here I share one of many pages used to track the provenance, the materials, location, and other information behind each piece. Next to it is a contemporary image of the piece being tracked on that piece of paper, referred to as DSS 29, which is part of Judd Foundation's permanent collection at 101 Spring Street. Finally, here it is as represented in the 1975 catalog Raisonné. And I do want to note here that Judd's works, as you might have noticed, are generally untitled, and DSS 29 is a catalog raisonné number, but not the title to the work. I also wanted to share an installation view of the exhibition with which the catalog raisonné was published. The DSS 29 isn't in this image, but it was too good not to share. Our fourth series is interviews and lectures. Spanning 4 decades, this series consists of handwritten and typed drafts, transcripts, notes, and correspondence for both published and unpublished interviews with and lectures by Judd. These files address a wide range of subjects related to Judd's life and work. This is a page from a transcript of a 1968 interview with art critic and writer Lucy R. Lepard, who is one of my favorite art writers. In it, she mentions that she should write an article about Judd instead of interviewing him again. He responds, quote, "I'd rather have an article because, for one thing, I'm gloomy about a lot of things lately. Also, apropos of interviews, I do all the talking and nobody else sits down and thinks about the work. And I'm sort of beginning to resent explaining it myself," end quote. This is a sentiment that I think a lot of artists can relate to. In addition to transcripts, we have a small collection of audiovisual material, including Michael Blackwood's short documentary shot in 1972 called The Artist's Studio. I won't share it with you here today in the interest of time and copyright, but I do recommend you watch the excerpt on the Foundation's website in the biography section if you're interested. The fifth series is correspondence. This consists of incoming, outgoing, and studio correspondence, as well as artist files. Although the first 3 subseries are closed, our artist files are open. And on the right, you could see a letter from the artist Yayoi Kusama to Donald Judd from 1978, from the subseries of artist files. So the artist files is a collection of material organized by artist. If Judd was friendly with an artist or interested in their work, they would have a file. And these largely consist of exhibition ephemera, clippings, and some correspondence. One artist who Judd was close to and who is also a favorite of mine is Yayoi Kusama. Here's an image of the artists together in Japan in 1978, as well as an early invitation for a 1959 exhibition of her paintings at Nova Gallery in Boston. And 9 years later, a flyer for a happening of Kusama's called the Keystone Phalanx Festival at St. Patrick Cathedral in 1968. Biographical materials includes address books, calendars, civic activities, collected material, personal records, student and teaching records, and travel. Related to the travel subseries, on the right is a 1970 image of Judd with his assistant Jamie Deering in Baja, California, a location that he was inspired by and would take multiple trips to. My personal favorite part of our biographical materials is Judd's civic activities, which covers a broad range of organizations and causes that Judd was involved with beginning in the 1960s. This does include a wide range of topics, including involvement in local political issues, and I've chosen to showcase material representing Judd's involvement with the groups Artists Against the Expressway, Citizens for Local Democracy, and the War Resisters League. So here on the left is a sheet of stationery for Artists Against the Expressway, a group that was co-founded by Julie Finch and organized by artists to oppose Robert Moses's plan for an expressway to cross through Lower Manhattan and ruin the neighborhood of Soho. The stationery includes names of artists who are now a significant part of art history, such as Roy Lichtenstein, Louise Nevelson, Yvonne Rainer, and Robert Rauschenberg, among others. On the right is a clipping of a general statement written by Judd that was published in local newspaper, the Lower Manhattan Township, in 1971. In which he discusses organizing local communities and critiques existing political structures. In it, he states, quote, "Everything that can be stopped, started, run by a community should be run by that community. The decision to delegate something to a wider area, say the city or the county, should be very carefully made. Nothing should be delegated because it's easier to do so, or it's a little more efficient." Another group that Judd supported was the War Resisters League, a pacifist organization that he became involved with in 1968. Judd hosted a fundraiser and exhibition for the organization at 101 Spring Street in 1986. And Judd Foundation has continued the support through hosting the War Resisters League in 2023 for a centennial celebration of the founding of the organization with public programming. We are also in possession of Judd's student and teaching records. Judd attended the Art Students League, the College of William and Mary, New York University, and Columbia University, where I mentioned earlier, he received a bachelor's in philosophy and a master's in art history. This is an excerpt of a 1956 essay that he wrote, in which he analyzes French pointillist painter Seurat's work, as illustrated by the image on the right. Now we come to financials. Financials is one of our larger subseries. It includes financials, employee files, and legal material. It consists of 101 Hollinger boxes that cover a wide range of Judd's financial history, both as an individual and as a working artist. As there is a wide time period and different employees over the years, there is inconsistent organization throughout. For example, some years have expenditures filed alphabetically by business name, whereas other years are organized by check number, for example. One of the things that Judd loved collecting was books. Here are two itemized receipts from 1968 and 1981, which show the broad range of his interests, including design theory, Shaker architecture, contemporary art, and Japanese joinery. One of the exciting initiatives that's happened through the archive is that you can actually browse Judd's books virtually on a website. Due to the efforts of my predecessor, Caitlin Murray, and others, I was able to utilize this resource and locate the Japanese joinery book, purchased in 1981, still a part of the library today. One of our last series is printed material. This includes printed material about the artist and by Judd, as well as printed material collected by the artist and his studio. Here's an early example of a 1966 newspaper clipping advertising Judd's exhibition at Leo Castelli Gallery, where he would show many in the future. Another interesting early piece of printed matter I liked is this 1958 exhibition catalog for a Jackson Pollock exhibition at the Sidney Janis Gallery, likely seen by Judd. Judd was interested by Pollock's work and wrote in 1967, during his time as an art reviewer in Arts magazine, that, quote, Pollock used paint and canvas in a new way. Everyone else, except for Frank Stella for the most part, used them in ways that were developments upon traditional European or Western ways of handling paint and canvas. In addition, we have writing and reviews of Judd's work, such as this 1977 article in New York Magazine by Thomas Hess, who remarked, quote, Judd decides how certain shapes can be expressed, articulated, varied, much as a choreographer decides how a dancer's body should move and gesture. The extraordinary aspect of Judd's talent is that within the fixed limits of his aesthetic, he finds so many possibilities. That's a brief glimpse of our collection. I really encourage anyone interested in doing research with us to apply, and this is just a brief glimpse. It holds so much important information for researchers, scholars, art historians, etc. So I'm now going to briefly touch on some current projects that we are working on in the archives, which includes serving research requests, always, further processing our photography and drawing collections, and working on our digital image database. We currently serve in-person and remote research requests. Remote due to the remote nature of the location of our archive. We are 3 hours from the nearest commercial airport. We work with a wide range of researchers from academic institutions to commercial galleries and museums, as well as with our colleagues for internal research requests. Some recent examples are architects from Slovenia who were researching the relationship between Donald Judd and Shaker ethos and design, a Houston, Texas-based architecture professor working on a presentation about Judd and the architect Louis Kahn, and a Swiss museum working on an exhibition about the artist Richard Paul Losa, who exhibited at 101 Spring Street and Trinity Foundation in the 1980s. The image on the right is a drawing by Loretta Vinciarelli, an architect and partner of Judd, whose drawings we are often asked for by those researching her. Photo collection processing. I'm currently reorganizing the photography archive, which consists of approximately 50 boxes of prints, slides, negatives, and transparencies. My activities have included remediating description, improving arrangement, creating a finding aid, and integrating unprocessed photographic material. All of this is looking towards eventual digitization, which is a project we'll be working on in the future. We are also currently working through a large collection of drawings by Judd, which were previously unprocessed. We have been measuring, describing, scanning them to be incorporated into our database, which includes a number of already processed drawings. Another component is our digital image project. We recently received an IMLS grant for a 2-year term digital image archivist to help gather, describe, and remediate description in our database of 38,000 photos and counting. This project includes reformatting, reorganizing, and remediating image files to improve metadata schema and, most importantly, increase findability. In terms of future projects, we have many, but a couple to share today is that we are currently working on creating facsimiles of archival material for our installed spaces. So this is to protect the original material, but maintain the experience of seeing the spaces as they were originally intended. And our other main focus is digitization of the photo collection as well as the Donald Judd Papers. This is going to allow for digital preservation of our unique analog material and improve research initiatives through enhancement of accessibility and findability. And finally, it will allow for the Foundation's expanded use of digital archival material. I wanted to say thank you to Caitlin Murray and Irene Luley and other previous interns and archivists for doing the work here and laying the foundation so that I could present today and continue your work in the archives. I'd also like to thank my archives advisory group for their support, as well as my archives colleagues, Susan Moorer and Derek Rankins, for their daily collaboration and support, as well as the rest of the staff and leadership at Judd Foundation. And finally, thank you to the Archivists Roundtable of New York for asking me to do this presentation, and to all of you for attending. And I believe we'll have a small Q&A now.
Wonderful. Sorry, let me just make sure that I add you back to the spotlight. Okay, not sure why I can't add to spotlight. Here we go. Technology, gotta love it. Thank you so much, Erin. That was such a terrific presentation. And it was a wonderful overview of all things Judd related. It was very thorough.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we do have time, about 15 minutes for some questions and answers. If you have yet to enter anything into the chat, this is a very good opportunity to do so. We would love to have a discussion and address any questions that the audience might have. So I guess I'll get started. Why not? You and I had talked about this briefly before the webinar, but the Archivist Roundtable, of course, represents a very diverse group. We're more than 400 archivists, librarians, and records managers in New York and the metropolitan area. And though our acronym does spell ART, our membership encompasses many different disciplines. So it's always refreshing to hear from a repository whose focus is literally documenting the life's work of a single artist. So it was so interesting to receive that overview from you. My full-time job, I'm the digital archivist and research associate at the Wildenstein Plattner Institute. And my position really entails processing artist archives in order to help support the research staff in preparation and development of different ongoing catalog raisonné projects of the artists that my company represents. And since the Judd Foundation, as you mentioned, is developing, or I guess a new iteration of the catalog raisonné on Judd's work, they're having like a new edition coming out. I was wondering if you could relate similarly with your work in the archives. Like, have the archives been beneficial to filling in certain research gaps? Have there been any significant or noteworthy discoveries that you'd like to share?
Sure. Yes, so I work very closely with our catalog raisonné team, who is made up of Ellie Meyer and Johanna Semlich. I think Johanna might even be on this call, so hello. And we are always collaborating with digging out information about specific artworks or specific exhibitions. And even today, for example, I found some photographs that were allegedly from an exhibition that happened in 1970 in Essen, Germany, but we didn't yet have that accounted for in our exhibition database. So it's always a sort of back and forth and a collaboration, but they've been doing really incredible deep research and deep work, and yeah, which will eventually be coming out into the world as a catalog raisonné. So keep your ear to the ground for that future date.
Wonderful. Is the catalog digital, or is it going to be a print?
I believe it will be both.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah. We're strictly digital, so that's why I was curious. So
Mhm.
let me see. We have some questions just inserted into the chat. Okay, great. So we have one question. When did Judd first have his archivist start organizing his stuff? How were things organized before the first archivist came in? Actually, I have something similar. I was curious about maybe just to attach onto this question about the like condition of the artist archives. Like, did Judd have any input or investment in his own legacy, or how the archives should be maintained? Like, if he has, there's some of the artists that we had worked with, some of them go from one side of the spectrum where they are very hands-on, they are very like micromanaging their own legacy of like how they want the public to interpret them, to artists that are very laid back and don't even have a traditional archives and set in place, and it's the responsibility of the family to take care of that. So
Absolutely. As far as I understand it, a lot of the original order came from the studio itself. And the archiving in earnest didn't begin until after Judd had passed, and the estate eventually would become the foundation. And so I came around, in 2022. So he passed in 94. So the material had gone through a lot of iterations by the time I showed up. But it's really all thanks to who I already mentioned, my predecessor, Caitlin Murray, and other archivists and interns who were able to really put things in, new housing and describe them properly, make finding aids. Um, Ultimately, in terms of your question, Samantha, I do think that Judd was very aware of his own legacy and was very interested in organizing and preserving material related to it. Largely because of that, a large majority of our material is in pretty good condition. There's always the sort of material question where there's like maybe old, fax papers or things that over time have faded slightly, but we've done a lot of preservation photocopying and examples like that. So there's, yeah, there is quite a lot of material that is in pretty good shape, luckily for us.
and I guess just to piggyback on this topic, I'm curious about the involvement of Flavin and Rayner, both of the children of Donald Judd. I was wondering if they're also involved in the maintenance or the caring of their father's legacy, or are they like separate from the foundation?
Yeah, so that's a great question. They are actually very involved in the foundation. They are the head of it. So Rayner is the president and Flavin is the artistic director. And they are often working very hard on many different aspects of the foundation and the preservation of their father's legacy.
Okay, great. Okay, let me see. I have some more questions. I'm hogging all of the questions. Let me
No
see
worries.
what.
I can't see the chat, so whatever, it's up to you.
Yeah. So we have a question about the physical space of the archives, and this is interesting. And they were interested to connect that with like Judd's spatial philosophies. If there's like any overlap or the contrast between like how the archives maybe are stored or arranged, and if that sort of corresponds to any of like his own art, like philosophies or his like it's like a manifesto, I guess, that he like have how he conceptualizes spaces and how the archives sort of corresponds to that.
Yes, so we are currently housing our archive in what we call colloquially the print building. And so it is a former hotel and also office and workspace of Judd Foundation. It used to be, before our time, it was a bank. It was, local city commerce association. It was a hotel. And so we actually, the beginning of our collection, it sort of moves throughout the building according to how much space there is, which is, I think, in line with the fact that Judd was really into reuse of spaces and preservation of those spaces. So actually, we have two bank vaults that, three bank vaults that have archival material in them, along with some sort of overflow into our basement space. But the goal is someday to have a separate archives building actually for research and for housing, climate controlled archive spaces. So that is very much down the line, but is something that we're thinking about.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like being in Marfa, Texas. I mean, we had to postpone our webinar to today. Just you said mentioned that the weather has a mind of its own. So like, it are your current spaces? You said a bank vault. I'm assuming that that might be temperature controlled, but like how do you monitor that? Do you have an HVAC system? Like how do you have like a on-site preservation team or conservators that are
Mhm.
on call for these types of assistance projects?
Yeah, all of the above. So we do have an HVAC system. We have a conservation and collections team that monitor with data loggers the different spaces that the archival material is in. So we have a constant read out of the climate and the control of the climate and can sort of adjust based on the needs of the material. And so that's been really helpful to have that as a something to look to in terms of just pure data and ways that we can make sure that the material is getting the best sort of care that it can with the material and space that we have available to us.
Yes, it's the ideal. Okay,
Mhm.
so I was actually curious about so the foundation, as you mentioned, they are primarily in like Marfa, Texas, but you guys maintain like 22 buildings on like 12 properties, including a 5-story loft building at 101 Spring Street. And for those who haven't had an opportunity to actually tour 101 Spring Street, you are able to. I personally have done it a few years ago and I loved it. It was so fascinating to tour his former residence, studio, all the above. And it's a great tour. Highly recommend. I'm gonna put a plug in it. But I was just curious, like, there's so many things to consider and to factor. And you were also mentioning that the archives are not just like objects themselves, they're spaces. And like how you archive a space, that just is so fascinating to me. So I wondered if you want to talk a little bit about that. Like, I know you're primarily in Marfa, but do you get to travel? Do you come to New York? Or like how connected is the archives with the other branches?
Yeah, great question. Well, so I haven't come up to New York since I started this position, but I am in the summer. Looking forward to that. And there's really just an incredible team of people working at Judd Foundation. I'm in the office of someone named Peter Stanley right now, who is the director of operations and preservation. So he's him and our collections team and our facilities spaces, technicians, we have a lot of people working to maintain the spaces, either in a way that really is involved with maintaining what was there basically when Judd passed away. And then because of that, there is archival material out. And that's why I was mentioning the creation of facsimiles, because those spaces are a little bit more open to that. I mean, they're not open to the elements literally, but there are tours going through. So there are doors opening and closing and light and dust and things like this. So it's really a team effort over here. And most of the archival, well, all of the archives is based in Marfa. So while you can go to 101 Spring Street to see installations of artwork, you really do have to come out to Marfa or put in a remote request to work with us. And I think that was partially intentional in terms of the importance of context and space in Judd's work and where he lived and worked. And in order to really experience that, it's good to go to the actual places and have a phenomenological experience yourself.
And I was just thinking back to the extent of the collection. I mean, it's incredible. Like you said, I think 186 linear feet. Is that all primarily on site at the foundation, or do you have like separate unit, like storage facilities or offsite units, or is everything self-contained in one area?
Everything is a little spread out around the building, which has many rooms. And then we also have a lot of our special collections materials, such as drawings and prints. Those are located in a different bank vault in a former bank building that is now called the Architecture Studio, which is a space that Judd used to work on architectural projects. And that's also a space that is open for touring. The special collections section is closed, but one is able to see anything from a Alvar Aalto furniture to a Rembrandt etching. There's like a lot of really amazing things that he collected and installed, which yeah, are open for viewing. The archive isn't necessarily as open for viewing, but you can always apply to research with us, and we're generally very encouraging and open to that.
I was going to ask if, like, if you have to make an appointment, or like what the process is, if you have a reading room.
Yeah, so the process is to reach out to archives@juddfoundation.org, which is basically me and my coworker Susa. And what you'll do is then receive a research application from us, so that we have a little bit more of an understanding of the context and intention and final project behind whatever research that the researcher would be doing. And then once it's approved, we'll send you the finding aid and work with you to find material related to whatever it is that you're researching, and just sort of, yeah, go from there.
Wonderful. So we're about time. I am sorry that we weren't able to get to all the questions in the chat, but we do appreciate you all. Thank you all for joining us for this insightful discussion on the Judd Foundation Archives. And a special thank you, of course, to Erin for sharing your expertise and giving us a deeper understanding of how these archival materials preserve and illuminate Judd's legacy. I wish you all a wonderful rest of your evening, and looking forward to seeing you all next time.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. Take care now.